Texas A&M has a major matchup this weekend against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish in South Bend. But who should we keep an eye on in this matchup?
You are Locked On Aggies, your daily podcast on the Texas A&M Aggies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome in. You are Locked On the Texas A&M Aggies. I am your host, Matt Galatzan, publisher of Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Thank you for making Locked On Aggies your first listen every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Football season is around the corner. It's actually here, guys. Visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your future bets now. Zach, Texas A&M might have the game of the week in college football this week. They travel up to South Bend to take on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Notre Dame is currently a 9.5-point favorite. We're going to get into our picks later in the week, but I'm going to tell our listeners right now I am going to take that line for sure. But hey, we got a lot to break down about this football game, so let's get into it. There are a few players, and we're going to start with Notre Dame and go into some players to keep an eye on for Notre Dame. We're going to get in the next segment. We're going to talk some X-factors in this matchup for Texas A&M, and then we're going to close out the show with some SEC power rankings. But first, Notre Dame. You take a look at the stat sheet. They didn't have a whole lot of offensive output against the Miami Hurricanes in their opener. Some disappointing showings for some players that we otherwise thought would have had a big impact. Most notably, Jeremiyah Love, who was a Heisman Trophy contender coming into the season, barely touched the ball against the Hurricanes. But if we're going to talk about players to watch for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, it has to start with Jeremiyah Love.
Yeah, like you said, it was not a good season opener for him by his standards. And in a way that may spell some trouble for A&M because he's going to be looking to come out and swing early. And so they got to be expecting that because it's going to be hard to see him, not having the kind of production he expects in back-to-back games. And they get a two-headed attack at running back as well with Jadarian Price, who actually led Notre Dame in rushing against Miami. He had like a 30-yarder, which was most of his yardage. So, got to take it with a little bit of a grain of salt. But, good two-headed rushing attack there. Jeremiyah Love gets all the attention, but Price is really talented as well. They don't have Riley Leonard anymore as a running quarterback, but CJ Carr, he can move a little bit. So got to watch out for that, definitely.
Yeah, CJ Carr had a touchdown on the ground against Miami in week 1. I was particularly surprised. Jadarian Price and Jeremiyah Love is arguably one of the best running back tandems in the country, right alongside Penn State's duo, Louisville's duo, Texas A&M's duo. It's right there. And for them to combine for 16 carries in that game on such a big stage was extremely disappointing and surprising for me. So I expect them to come out and try and run the football, especially against the Texas A&M defense that got gashed in week 1 against UTSA. And I think they're going to try to run the ball early. I think they're going to try to run the ball often, keep the pressure off of CJ Carr. Cassius Howell for Texas A&M had 3 sacks against the Utah State Aggies this past week. So, and also Notre Dame's offensive line didn't hold up particularly well against the pass rush with Miami. So I think that they're going to try and focus on running the football. But they also have to have a balanced attack, Zach. And one player that also just was off the stat sheet in week 1 that was super, super surprising to me was Jaden Greathouse. Austin Westlake native, really, really talented player. He especially came on late last season during the college football playoff run that Notre Dame had against Penn State in the semifinal. He had 7 catches for 105 yards and a touchdown. And against Ohio State in the national title game, 6 catches, 128 yards, 21.3 yards per catch, and 2 touchdowns. Notre Dame's got a lot of good receivers on that roster, but Jaden Greathouse might be their most explosive one, and they have to get him going in this game. You can't have a game if you're Notre Dame that doesn't utilize your best players against this Texas A&M defense. So I do think that they're going to try to get him going, and I think Texas A&M really has to watch out for this guy.
Yeah, definitely. Marcus Freeman, Notre Dame, they didn't play this past weekend, so they've had a lot of extra time prepare for A&M, and I'm positive that during that time they were questioning themselves, why didn't we use Jaden Greathouse? Why didn't we use Jeremiyah Love to the extent that we should? Don't try to get too cute. And I don't think they're going to try to get too cute against A&M. And so, there's a lot of motivation there because you saw, they were still in the game against Miami despite that. And so if they can use two of their best players on offense or two of their best skill position guys, what could the result be? And so, that's kind of a dangerous feeling if you're an Aggies fan, thinking about that and what could be for A&M or for Notre Dame's offense if they really utilize those guys. So, and plus, like you said, Austin native Jaden Greathouse, he's got, probably, I don't know if he grew up a Texas fan. I'm not sure about that, but definitely has got ties, to Austin. So maybe he's a little bit, extra motivated for this game against A&M. So, those things can play a factor for sure. But yeah, I just think Notre Dame, once I saw them lose to Miami, I was like, that can be a little bit of trouble because now Notre Dame's going to be a little bit more desperate heading into this game. A&M, if they lose this game, their whole season is still ahead of them. But if Notre Dame loses this, it's going to be tough to see them potentially making the CFP. I don't have their schedule pulled up, at the moment, but I don't think they're facing too many tougher opponents than A&M the rest of the way. As talented as A&M is, so. Notre Dame's going to be really desperate coming into this game. A&M not as much, but if A&M does win this game, you can feel really, really good about their CFP chances heading down the line. If they can split maybe LSU and Texas, those road games as well. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, I think Notre Dame's going to be a little bit more desperate, and that can play into their favor. And so A&M needs to realize that heading into it. And obviously, they're not going to take them for granted at all. We already know that. So.
Yeah, Notre Dame's schedule does not really do them any favors in terms of strength of schedule going forward after this game. They really, really need to get this one. I don't think they're going to hold anything back. Whereas Texas A&M, I realize they have a difficult schedule, especially, LSU, Texas, a lot of these other teams that they're going to play that are ranked right now. There's 11 SEC teams in the top 25 right now. But, Notre Dame, they need to get a quality win on their schedule. They got Purdue after this, at Arkansas, Boise State, who's not what we thought they were coming into the season, NC State, USC maybe might end up being a quality win, Boston College, Navy, Pittsburgh, Syracuse doesn't necessarily look like it's going to be a quality win anymore, and then Stanford. So very, very manageable schedule for Notre Dame, but not one that does them favors strength of schedule-wise. One other player I briefly want to mention as well that I think Texas A&M needs to look out for. You talked about Jadarian Price, and we talked about Jeremiyah Love, and talked about Jaden Greathouse. Jordan Faison is another Notre Dame wide receiver that is, particularly explosive when he gets his hands on the football. You need to make sure that you wrap this guy up, get him to the ground. Don't let him catch the ball in space. He could be a game breaker for Notre Dame as well. But those are just a few players that Aggie fans we think that you should watch out for in this game that could be part of a major part of the game plan for the Irish. Let's take our first break, though, Zach. When we come back, we're going to talk about some X-factors for the Aggies in this game coming up. They're going to need some guys to step up in some spots, and we think we have our hammer on which players you need to look out for there. So stick with us, and we'll be right back after this break. Today's episode is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. Time to fuel up and turn it on with 5 Hour Energy Transfusion. This great ginger and lime-flavored shot brings the iconic taste of a golf course favorite to a non-alcoholic boost. Perfect for sinking birdies or making great memories with friends, it's a hole-in-one for your energy game. Whether you're out on the course or just need a little extra push to power through your day, 5 Hour Energy Transfusion delivers the clubhouse flavor you love without ever leaving the green. I made a hole-in-one one time back in Dallas at Stevens Park Golf Course. Only one I've ever hit in my life. After that, I was so drained after celebrating that I really could have used one of these things to keep me going. It was probably a fluke, but if you get more of these 5 Hour Energy transfusions in your game, you may be able to hit one yourself. But listen, golf is all about good times with good people and good flavors. The great ginger lime flavor of 5 Hour Energy Transfusion gives you the best parts of your clubhouse go-to without ever leaving the course or chasing down the bev cart. Now you can amp up the fun even more. Just buy, snap, and enter for a chance to win Dream Golf Trip for 2 to any golf tournament in the USA. Tee up that trip. Visit 5hewin.com for full rules and entry. No purchase necessary. Excludes the Masters tournament. Ends October 31st, 2025. Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for kickoff with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits however you like to bet. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in live as the action unfolds. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet. All right, Zach, we are just a few days away from kickoff. We're going to break down this matchup all week. But one of the things that I wanted to do today was talk about some X factors for Texas A&M that we think need to have a big impact on this game and seem primed to have a big impact in this game as we go into the weekend. It's going to be a big stage. South Bend is no joke as in terms of a place to play, but I think Texas A&M is ready for this matchup, and I think my first X factor for sure. We've seen Mario Craver explode the last couple of games. We've seen Casey Concepcion explode for the last couple of games. Terry Bussey kind of got going against Utah State. I think he really explodes in this game because I think Notre Dame is really going to hone in on Mario Craver, really hone in on Casey Concepcion. And that's going to leave Terry Bussey a lot more opportunities to get the ball in space, get upfield, be explosive, and use them in a lot of different ways, whether it's in kick return, whether it's on reverses, jet sweeps, drag routes, screens, or even down the field like he caught his touchdown, this past week. I think that he's really primed for a big-time national stage explosion, and I think this could be the game where he gets that done.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. There's been no shortage of us talking about his versatility on this show, and it's no secret for anyone else out there the kind of things that he can do. And yeah, you've kind of just been expecting a breakout from him this year. Last season it's not like he wasn't involved or anything, but A&M's offense was a little bit inconsistent at times, and so I don't think he really got to show his full capabilities. But this season, especially going into this game, I'm with you there. Just a quick note. Last season in that opener against Notre Dame, A&M, a lot was made of it. Connor Wegman only threw for 100 yards. So I think it's pretty safe to say that, A&M's and Marcel Reed is going to definitely eclipse that mark. Definitely want to get Le'Veon Moss involved on the ground. But, yeah, Bussey for sure is going to have an impact, in my opinion, just because Casey Concepcion and Mario Craver have proven so much on film over 2 games that Notre Dame's going to have no choice but to potentially double those guys, on certain plays, not both at the same time, but, definitely going to receive lots of attention there. Terry Bussey may have single coverage, and so that could be to his benefit. But for my X factor, I'm going to go on the other side of the ball on defense. And, it may not be an X factor in some people's eyes. X factors are people that kind of may, slide under the rug a little bit, and you may not, see them coming. But for my X factor, it's going to be Taurean York, just because I just think that combining defending Notre Dame's run game with Love, and then the tight end Eli Raridan. He led Notre Dame not last week, but the first game against Miami in receiving. And so when you combine the fact that York might be on him in man coverage, and then also having to defend the run against Love and Price, I just think that he's going to be, incredibly important in this game. York is already a star in that defense. We already know that. So you may argue, he's not really an X factor. But in my opinion, just because of the things that he's going to be asked to do in this game against the pass, against the run, he's going to be invaluable. And so Eli Raridan, 5 catches, 97 yards. Most of that was on a 65-yarder that he had. But Notre Dame's had some good tight ends over the years. And so I think that, Eli Raridan is just another one of those guys that is going to have a big impact. And it's only been 1 game for Notre Dame. We've only seen 1 game sample size. So we don't know what this will look like for them down the line as the season goes on. But it's clear that they got another talented tight end on their hands. And so Taurean York, in my opinion, he's just going to be super impactful in this game, or he's going to need to be impactful if A&M wants to have a chance to win, because like we mentioned, I don't see Jeremiyah Love and Jadarian Price having the kind of output that they did against Miami. I think they're going to be looking for way more than they did in that game or in Saturday's game. And so Taurean York and the whole defense, for that matter, is going to be really important. And we'll see what happens. But Eli Raridan, we talked about Jaden Greathouse, but I think that Raridan is going to be a guy that can look to have an impact in this game for sure.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I don't think that there's a single player that's more important to the Texas A&M defense heading into this football game than Taurean York. He's the captain of the defense. He gets everybody where they're supposed to be, lines everybody up correctly. That stuff is all going to be critical, but also at the same time, he's going to have a lot of different responsibilities himself in terms of helping to stop this dynamic running duo, helping to stop the tight ends and do all those things, and spy on CJ Carr. CJ Carr was not thought of as a running quarterback coming into this season, but he had some good runs against Miami, so that's something they're going to have to watch out for. I'm going to give you guys a bonus X factor as well here. I'm going to go with Cassius Howell. I think that you have to get pressure in this game early and often on CJ Carr, because if you let him break a few runs with his legs, that's really going to take the momentum and take the wind out of your sails as a defense. He struggled in week 1 to get after the passer. Last week, he had 3 sacks on 1 drive, so it seemed like he really honed in on what he needed to do to be successful. I think that he needs to be be able to pin his ears back in this game, get after CJ Carr, make his night uncomfortable so that they have to become a little bit more predictable and run the football. And then that'll allow you to stop the run if you can put some guys in the box and turn them into a run-first offense. It's going to be a difficult thing to do because this is a really talented Notre Dame team. They've got good players at skill positions everywhere. But CJ Carr is a really young quarterback. It's only his second start of his entire career. And if you can get him uncomfortable and like Miami did, then I think you're going to be in for a successful night.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you there. Cassius Howell, another example kind of where, he's not going to really fly under the radar on Notre Dame whenever they're looking at A&M film. But if A&M wants to win, they need him to get to CJ Carr. He's not going to get 3 sacks in 3 plays. If he does, then no one will stop talking about it, especially if he does in South Bend. That was a pretty rare feat that he did there. I don't care who you play. That's a really impressive thing to do. But if he can just get some pressure, not even register a sack, if he can just make CJ Carr uncomfortable, he's not going to be able to get it to the weapons that we mentioned previously. So that's going to be really important there. And I totally agree with you. Cassius Howell, man, he's just really come on ever since arriving, last offseason from Bowling Green. So you really like to see what he's been doing so far this season.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, let's take our second break. When we come back, we're gonna go through the SEC power rankings that we released over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI. Kind of break down where these teams sit, whether or not we think there should be some movement in these power rankings, how it could change this week depending on what happens. So stick with us. We will be right back after this break. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. College football is back, and I couldn't be more excited. The tailgates, the rivalries, the energy in the stands, there's just nothing like it. But let's be real. Actually getting tickets can feel a little bit more of a battle than the game itself. Endless queues, hidden fees, prices jumping at checkout. That's why I use Game Time, the app that gives the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to score last-minute tickets at the best prices, no surprise fees. What you see is what you pay. I pulled up Game Time, and in just a couple of taps, I saw amazing deals. I'm talking about your favorite college football games for as low as $25. So take the guesswork out of buying college football tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download the Game Time app today. I'm getting a hell of a lot better at these ad reads, Zach. I'll tell you what. All right, let's get into some SEC power rankings. We released our own version of the SEC power rankings over on Texas A&M Aggies on SI. You guys should go check it out if you haven't already. But I like to let I'm the publisher, you're my managing editor. We kind of run this thing together over there. We kind of like to let people have their own opinions and have their own say, and kind of to a certain extent. I mean, we don't let people get out of control, but we like for people to be able to put their own spin on what they're doing over there. So it's always some pretty good content. We released our power rankings over there. I'm not sure that I necessarily agree with everybody where everybody sits in these power rankings. So we'll go through it real quick and close out the show on this. But we have LSU here at number 1. They're sitting at 2-0. They beat Clemson in week 1. They got a 23-7 win over Louisiana Tech. Not the best game, but they took care of business. Georgia, number 2, also 2-0. Looked a little sloppy in their win over Austin Peay, but 2-0 is 2-0, and they're the Georgia Bulldogs. They deserve the benefit of the doubt. Texas Longhorns at number 3, after they really got the rug pulled out under them against Ohio State. They took care of business against San Jose State. Arch Manning looked a lot better. They won 38-7. Still a work in progress over there, though. Oklahoma 2-0, definitely the biggest win of the weekend in the SEC, beating Michigan. Really dominated that football game. Tennessee has looked unstoppable so far. They had 734 yards of offense this past weekend against East Tennessee State. Granted, it's not the biggest competition ever, but they're also sitting at 2-0. South Carolina at number 6. They beat South Carolina State this past weekend. Ole Miss at number 7 after surviving Kentucky. Missouri at number 8. Auburn at number 9. And the Texas A&M Aggies coming in at number 10. And then behind them, we have Alabama at 11, Vanderbilt at 12, Mississippi State at 13, Florida at 14, Arkansas at 15, and Kentucky at 16. I'm going to come right out and say it on the top. I think Texas A&M needs to be higher up this list. I think they should be ahead of at least Ole Miss at number 7. I did not think the Rebels looked good against Kentucky. Austin Simmons really struggled in that football game. Marcel Reed looks like the better quarterback thus far. You can make the argument that they could be higher than South Carolina too, but I think 7 is probably the spot that you should look for Texas A&M right now. I think Texas should probably be behind Oklahoma at the moment, just given the fact that Oklahoma has really had no trouble so far this season. Texas has a loss on their record. I would almost put Oklahoma number 1 in these power rankings just based on the way they played last week, but it's up for debate. So tell me what you think, Zach. I mean, I personally think A&M should be higher. I think Oklahoma should be higher. I think Texas should be a little lower, and I think Florida should be last.
Yeah, that's the thing about being in week 2 and heading into week 3 of the season, is that not a ton is going to separate some of these teams. It is simply a toss-up for some of these rankings. We haven't even started SEC play. I mean, Georgia and Tennessee playing this weekend is really going to determine where some of these things fall. But yeah, for A&M, it's kind of tough because they just haven't played the level of competition quite yet. Obviously, there's a lot to be determined there going into South Bend this weekend. And so they could easily shoot up these power rankings, across the board for any site. So 10 is definitely a little bit low because South Carolina and Ole Miss, like you mentioned, both of those teams, they picked up wins. But South Carolina didn't look too great in the first half in South Carolina State. South Carolina State is they played it pretty good in the first half, but there was some weather delays there, so you got to take that into account as well. But yeah, you expected more out of the Gamecocks for sure. Missouri beating Kansas, good win in a rivalry game. It was at home. Kansas, is definitely better than in years past, but it wasn't like it was, a program changing win or anything like that. So can't put too much stock into it. Auburn's looked decent. They picked up a good win at Baylor in week 1. Baylor beat SMU in double overtime. So, Auburn, they can make some noise. That's to be determined. But yeah, 10 for A&M is just a little bit too low for me, just because, the way that they've looked on offense has been really encouraging. Yeah, the run defense wasn't what you wanted it to be against UTSA, but like we've mentioned before, UTSA is a solid group of 5 teams. So, it's not like they were going to beat and blow them out 70-0 like we saw some of the games this past weekend. So, it's just tough. These power rankings, it's just so early. It's a fun exercise to do. But it is pretty tough for some of these teams because either they haven't played anyone yet, or they lost close, to a good team. Like for Texas, for example, they're 1-1. They lost by 7 on the road at Ohio State. So it's tough. Yeah, it's tough to put them, over Oklahoma, in my opinion, because Oklahoma is a ranked win on their schedule or on their resume, and they're 2-0. So a lot's going to be changing here in the next couple of weeks when it comes to these teams. But I'd put A&M maybe. I'm with you there. Above South Carolina, above Ole Miss. I think the 6th spot, right below like Tennessee, is good for A&M right now, just because they haven't played anyone quite yet, and so it's nothing against the Aggies or anything. It's just the resume at this point in the season is not quite there because that's just how their schedule worked out. So. Like I said, though, that's going to change pretty quickly depending on if they can beat Notre Dame. Because if they walk out of South Bend 3-0, it's going to be hard to argue A&M not being number 1 in the SEC power rankings. As we approach SEC play, because LSU, they're number 1. They beat Clemson on the road, but they didn't look super great against La Tech. So Louisiana Tech. So 23-7, you kind of expected a bigger margin of victory there. And then, like you mentioned with Georgia, it wasn't really what we expected of the Bulldogs either. So A&M will have a great argument to be number 1 in the SEC power rankings if they pull out a win this weekend. Jumping from 10 to 1 is very realistic from our site's perspective. So yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I mean, there are a few teams that have a chance to move up these rankings. Texas A&M is definitely one of them if they pull off a win in South Bend, especially if they win by, a decent margin. Tennessee is going to have a chance to move up. They play Georgia this weekend. That's one of the best games on the schedule this week. LSU, plays Florida this week. Let's see what the Gators do. I'm not very confident in that. Texas plays UTEP. They'll probably stay put. Missouri plays Louisiana. Auburn plays South Alabama. Alabama plays Wisconsin, who's undefeated right now, so that could give them a decent push. Oklahoma plays Temple. Mississippi State's against Alcorn State. So and Kentucky, Eastern Michigan, South Carolina, Vanderbilt. So Texas A&M will really have a good shot to move up these rankings, as will Tennessee, as will Georgia. So it's definitely something to keep an eye out for. But that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Aggies. Thank you so much for making Locked On Aggies your first listen today. But hey, it's another big moment for Locked On. College football fans, Locked On and Fire TV present College Football Kickoff, your ultimate college football weekly preview. Drake Toll of Locked On Big 12 leads the conversation alongside 2-time AP Coach of the Year Gary Patterson, former college star Jesse Holley, and Locked On's local experts. Hopefully I will be on there this week. We will see, and I will keep you posted on that. But it's a college football preview that only Locked On can do. Catch College Football Kickoff every Thursday throughout the season, only on Fire TV. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to our channel, subscribe to our podcast. Give me a follow on Texas A&M Aggies over on SI and on X at Matt Galatzan. Follow Zach on X at Zach Dimmitt 7 with 2 M's and 2 T's. And we will see you next time.